Leonardo da Vinci, because he was Italian, you see. He said that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Now, I don't know what that means exactly, but I think it applies to Ion Fury. Ion Fury is as approachable as it is enjoyable. It's simple, right? But at the same time, it feels like it's a wholly contained experience. All the pieces, much like a fine machine, work together to create something that doesn't just work on a mechanical level, but it all seems to fit together in an aesthetic kind of way. Now, it's very obvious from the first moment that you started watching this footage that this isn't supposed to be a quote-unquote modern kind of shooter. It takes the retro aesthetic that will never grow old, that will never go away, and that will never, oddly enough, seem to age. It takes these things and gives it kind of that modern touch in terms of the controls, the performance, while still keeping the feel that this is a game that was made 30 years ago. There was a time when technical limitations meant that games had to operate in a certain way. Instead of having fully three-dimensional enemies, for instance, you'd use sprites, you'd use JPEGs, and they would turn and alter themselves, and you would squeeze every little trick that you could into the book into making a game that was able to run on the systems of the time. And that gave games, as a result, a lovely aesthetic. Something you don't get these days. And now it's turned into its own sort of look, its own sort of feel. It's kind of interesting. What used to be a necessity has now become a style. Ion Fury isn't attempting to push boundaries. Instead, it's kind of doing the opposite in a weird way. It's pulling them back. It's reminding you this is the way games used to be. And what used to be a necessity because of the technical limitations, now you can experience in a modern context as a style. Everything has a charming aesthetic to it. It looks interesting, runs great. There's a certain simplicity to it, but it doesn't try to hide how simple it is. It embraces it. It becomes its own flavor, you could say. I think that's something that Nintendo games do really well. They don't try to push the envelope in terms of graphics or things like that. They try to be creative. They embrace what they are and what they can do, and they make the best of it. It plays like a game out of time. It emulates the Quakes and the Dooms in an aesthetic sense really well, while also bringing into it modern controls, an excellent frame rate, a lot of the quality of life things that we expect from modern stuff. It mixes the new and the old and creates a great experience. So, when it comes to the game itself, the story is really, really simple. There are bad men, and you have to kill them. There you go. There's your Ion Fury story. Bad men, shoot them. You play as, Shelly Bombshell Harrison. Yeah, boy, that's a name. You essentially navigate through a series of levels. You'll fight a wide variety of different cyborg-styled enemies. You'll use all your guns to find secrets and open doors and collect health and armor and upgrades, and generally, that's actually kind of about it. It's got a really simple premise to it. There's not a huge amount of complexity here. In the first couple hours, you'll pretty much grasp really easily the rest of the entire game. It's not exactly going to be throwing a huge number of curveballs at you. If you like what you see in the early game, expect it to continue for the rest of the game. They'll throw a couple new things here and there, nothing that really shakes you up, just a few new additions here and there, a couple new enemies, some nifty little boss fights, really cool environments. And I'll say this about the environments. One thing I really like about the game is that the environments are colorful, but they aren't obnoxiously vibrant. The geometry of the levels, it does remind you of Quake. It reminds you of Metroid, where you'll enter an area, you will encounter locked doors, and then you'll find the keys to those doors, go back, open the doors, proceed to the next area. You'll be doing this over and over and over again. Now, obviously, because of the graphical style of the game, there's not going to be an extremely realistic depiction of the places that you'll go to, but there's a great kind of... This will seem like a really odd comparison, but it's almost like a really, really good Minecraft player is copying the buildings in real life, where you know it's not real and it's missing real-life functionality, but at the same time, you see enough of the stuff present in the level to know, yeah, I know, this is an office building, this is an apartment complex, this is a subway, this is a train station. I know exactly what this place is. The locations feel oddly familiar. Everything from really wide open areas that almost play like arenas to smaller areas that have small hallways that are narrow, sometimes even dark, but not frustratingly so. The game's got a lot of good character to it. The levels really feel like they were crafted with a lot of attention. And a lot of the times when you leave a level, it will tell you, by the way, you're missing 7 secrets, 10 secrets. They're all over the place. If you're the kind of person who likes to look in every nook and cranny, then I think you're going to get a lot out of this game, because it certainly does reward you with a lot of extra goodies for finding all the tiny little secrets. A lot of games have like maybe 2 secrets a level or 3 that'll be really big, but Ion Fury, their secrets will be almost subtle. Just a tiny little button that opens a little bitty closet or something like that, right? But there'll be a lot of them. There's a lot of ingenuity that goes into making a lot of the space that the levels use ingeniously made. Basically, there's a lot of stuff that's packed into these areas. Now, when it comes to combat, it's very, very simple, right? It's very simple, but it's tight. It feels, for the most part, very fair, reliable. I never got frustrated by the game. I felt like the game respected the effort and the work that I put into it. And I think that the variety of enemies, while not overly numerous, kind of covered all the basics. The different cyborgs and machinations and things would do different attacks and move around at different speeds and attack you in different ways. And in proper first-person shooter fashion, I would say, you're encouraged to use certain weapons on certain enemies and save other weapons for other enemies. And you kind of learn what works. And the reaction times and the accuracy that enemies have pace the game at a really nice level. So you're not crawling around slowly making sure that there's never enemies around corners or that enemies aren't constantly getting the drop on you. But at the same time, the game is difficult enough and enemies behave in a way that doesn't encourage you to just go total 0 to 60 and blaze through the levels completely with reckless abandon. There's a really good mix here. And I make sure to say this in this review because sometimes if a game has really bad pacing, if you constantly feel like it's going too slow, then you can get bored. It's not fun. It's not engaging. I did a review of Dusk not too long ago, and this game nailed that. It was really quick. It was exciting. It encouraged you to not play it too safe. Not to say it was easy, but it didn't want you crawling around being too overly cautious, because while it's fun in some games, in a game like this, it's more fun to go through at a nice speed, looking around for secrets, all the while, all the little doors and lockers and knickknacks and doodads that you can open up and give your character more ammo and armor and power-ups and whatnot, but at the same time, you have fun doing it. This is the kind of game that you can sit down and just play for hours at a time, just barreling on through, having a good time. You can save the game manually, but there's also a fairly lenient autosave system as well. A little annoying to do manual saves because you have to make a new name for each save to make sure that it overwrites the previous one. You'll get used to it. Not a huge deal. Now, a game like this can live and die on the weapons. If the weapons aren't fun to use, if they're dull, if they're mediocre, if they don't work, if they're inconsistent, then the whole game can be a slog, and it won't be fun. Ion Fury is kind of a mix in this aspect. The weapons aren't particularly a thrill to use, and they're not very interesting, but they're all very functional. They're all useful. I don't feel like any of my weapons is anemic or weak or worthless, and you get a decent variety of them. Everything from the shotgun to the grenade launcher to setting down mines to throwing grenades. It all works. They seem really consistent. They feel like weapons that you can rely on. It doesn't feel like you're just rolling the dice whenever you shoot at enemies. You generally get and learn fairly quickly the grasp of this will do this damage to these enemies. And I was running out of ammunition not frequently, but every once in a while with particular weapons if I overuse them. So the game definitely encourages you to not just use a single weapon. There will be your mainstays, your revolver, called the Loverboy, your shotgun, just generally multi-purpose kinds of weapons that you can use oftentimes, but the game does tend to sort of encourage you to be diverse with your weapon selection. Throw grenades, launch your launchers, use your laser crossbow, pull out that minigun, go to town. Don't just stick with one thing, don't be a one-trick pony. Now, I played through my gameplay at normal difficulty, as I tend to do for reviews. I never had much issues in the ways of enemies being unfair or too difficult. Some enemies were slightly annoying, like the ones that fly, but for the most part, I didn't have too much issues in the way of frustration at all. The game certainly has rewarded me for having good aim. There's just enough of a window of time where enemies will react to your presence that gives you a moment to take them out before they can deal damage to you. But it's not like they won't punish you for just walking into a room and fiddling around. I feel like explosive damage could be toned down a little bit. In Ion Fury, it's kind of better to be shot by a hail of bullets than it is to be hit by a single grenade. And the careless use of your own grenades and explosives will hurt you a great deal. You definitely get punished for friendly fire on yourself. All in all, Ion Fury's got a really fun pace. You never feel bored of it. You never feel like you are being punished unnecessarily by the game. The mechanics are simple. It doesn't constantly swap things up for you. But I mean, look at these levels. They look great. The colors and the lights. I mean, it really does look like Voidpoint had a lot of passion and care when they made this game. This seems like the kind of game that they wanted to create, and that shows. A great aesthetic overall, with a moderately challenging, modern take on the old classic shooters of old. I think that's probably the best way to describe it without you playing it yourself, but I think you should. I think that this game is definitely something that shooter fans should take a look at. Fun levels, fun combat, great look, lots of secrets, many enemies. You owe it to yourself to try Ion Fury, a fun game full of character. Give it a shot. I highly doubt you'll regret it.